Hi everybody, this is Academic English Skills, and this video concerns planning and writing an essay at university. That's right, planning and writing an essay, something that everybody at university will have to do at some stage. And this looks at what we need to do, how we can organize our ideas, and also our paragraphs. So I hope this will be very useful for anyone who's not sure about how to go about writing an essay. So we start right at the beginning as well, because we've got a lot to get through. So now remember, at university, all students are expected to do really three main things, okay? So you're expected to demonstrate good knowledge about your subject, and this will increase as you go through your degree levels. You're also expected to explore different parts of your subject. So you'll analyze and investigate and assess critically as you go through your levels again. And also you will be expected to give your own views, your opinions on what you've read, what you found, and why they are important. So these three things are very common in writing, and these three things can be displayed, you might say, by writing an essay. Remember, most assessments at university will involve writing an essay of some sort. Sometimes it could be a report, but really most assignments will follow an essay format. Right, so let's break it down again. We're going to start initial stages. We've got four items, four ideas on this slide, as you can see. Let's go through them, and we're going to go through them a little bit more detail on the subsequent slides. So first of all, we need to analyze the question, understand it. What does it want you to do? What key issues will you need to include? What's your opinion on the subject? And engage, get the ideas flowing as soon as you can, before you've even started researching it. You know, what's your initial viewpoint on it? What's your stance? Also find out what you're going to be assessed on. If the, if the essay is worth, say, 100 marks, for example, to have 100, how are those marks allocated? How are they split up? You know, do some areas get more marks? If they do, find out which ones do from the guidelines, which you'll normally get in your university modules. Then you're going to research and plan it, of course, gather evidence for your writing. You know, what do you need to know to answer the question? You know, what areas does it really need for you to investigate? How confident do you feel in the areas at the moment? Some you might feel okay about, some you might feel totally unsure about this. And also begin to think about where you're going to look for the information. Now, after you've researched and planned it, then you get the writing plan. Now, obviously, you need to think about how will you communicate your knowledge and understanding and ideas on the page. You'll write an outline structure. Think about how many paragraphs you need. This will depend on your word count. Obviously, if the word count's quite high, you'll need more paragraphs. Most of your paragraphs will be in your main body. Your main body might be divided into different sections. It depends on the question. Also, as you plan, what will be the main focus of each paragraph? Because each paragraph in your main body needs one main idea. And from the plan, then you go to the writing itself. Remember, it's called the writing process, because the idea is you write and rewrite until the ideas are clear and you're satisfied with what you've got to do, or what you've done, I should say, yeah, before you submit it. So there's always drafting, redrafting, changing what we need to change. Okay, so these four main ideas is what we're going to look at in more detail on the slides. So we need to start right at the beginning. Okay, so time is the most important thing when we're writing. Know when the deadline is. How many weeks do you have to complete it? You know, find out. Don't put your head in the sand. Don't be like some kind of ostrich. Yeah, know when the deadline is. Work your way back from the deadline so you know precisely how many weeks you have. Make a rough schedule that you can keep to. Put it on your phone, put it on the wall, somewhere that you can see it. Also factor in other things that are going to be happening in your life between now and the deadline. Maybe you have other assignments that also need to be completed. Remember, one of the challenges and also one of the skills to learn at university is to manage different projects at the same time, okay? Or also you might have things happening in your life. You might have a birthday, for example, if you've got kids, you'll obviously have to spend time with them, of course. So these things will affect the time that we have to complete something. And also you might work as well. So again, but plan it out as much as you can. Now start with the question you're given. Understand the question and see what it wants you to do, which might be obvious. But some questions can be quite long and quite detailed, which can be a bit confusing. Now, here's some quite common essay question words: discuss, outline, analyze, examine, and explore. So maybe pause the video here and have a think about what these different question words mean. And when you've got some ideas, click play, and we'll get some ideas on the next slide. Okay, so let's have a look at those question words. So discuss is looking at different viewpoints in detail, looking at the positives and maybe the negatives of these different viewpoints. You can't discuss by just focusing on one particular element. The idea is to look at all the different parts. Outline is we look at the main ideas in a subject. For example, if you've got quite a detailed essay question, but your word count's quite short, it might say outline, so it just means highlight the most important bits that stand out. Analyze is looking at something in depth, and usually analyze involves picking apart a subject or a topic and breaking it into smaller parts, and then seeing how these different parts fit together and work together. Maybe they do, but also maybe they might not. If they don't, tell the reader why. Examine is very similar to analyze. It's more about an investigation. Really, you're attempting to try and discover or uncover something through close attention to the topic. And explore is possibly similar to discuss. Look at a range of different viewpoints, questioning what you read and be open to different ideas. So I appreciate there are similarities between some of these words, but also there are some quite big differences between some of those words. So become familiar, i.e. they don't all mean the same. Okay, so from the analysis of the question, now remember the question is usually related to previous lectures or seminars that you've had. Do you have the notes on these lectures and seminars? If you don't, can you get them? Are they available on your, your VLE or your virtual learning environment that universities have? Break the question down into parts if it's quite long. Now, if it's quite long, it will have different parts. So see how the different parts fit together. You might have maybe 2 or 3 question words. You might, ask you to outline and then discuss, or it might ask you to, outline and then discuss and then analyze. So think about it, highlight the keywords and see what you need to do. Consider your views on the question. Again, which parts do you feel more confident about? You might feel quite confident on a certain part of the question, certain part of the subject, but another part you might have to spend more time finding the information. Also, some of the information, the ideas might be very new as well. Okay, research and plan. So, well, obviously you need to read. You can't get away from it really. You need to learn about your subject, and obviously reading gives us access to books, online articles, and new ideas and different viewpoints. And the bottom line is we can use these ideas in our essays. Otherwise, we've got nothing to write about. We've got no evidence that we can use. Remember, you cannot argue anything at university unless you have evidence. You're not writing opinion essays anymore. Okay, if anyone's written an IELTS essay, if anyone's done the IELTS exam, you're not writing like an IELTS paper anymore. You're moving away from that. You're getting ideas, sources to support your opinions now. So when we talk about finding good sources, there's the CRAP test, which I appreciate is a bit of a strange acronym, but it's the idea is we can use it to check the quality of sources. So CRAAP, and you can see what they stand for on the screen. Okay, so let's go over those in a little bit more detail. So the C is currency, which relates to when it was published or when it was posted, if it's online. The idea here is to see if the information's changed. You might only be asked to investigate research that is in the last 10 years. You probably have a time limit of where to go back to. And so when you're looking over time, think about how the ideas have changed. You might be working or studying in a fast moving research area where things change. But also you might be asked to write about how things have changed. So the currency, can be about the time. The relevance, well, of course, is the information related to your assignments? If it isn't, why are you using it? Also, what level is it? What I mean is it written for the general public? Or is the source that you're reading, is it written for a specialist or someone studying it like yourselves? Yeah. You want to find sources and articles that are relevant to university study, not ones that are relevant to general public who aren't really going to know a lot about the subject. The first A is authority, which relates to where the information comes from. Who is the author or authors? Who wrote it? Maybe they are specialists in the field. If they are, maybe they could be considered more trustworthy. Is it an organization? If so, what kind of organization? Is it an organization that's in charge of your subject area? If it is, that might make it more trustworthy as well. If it's not, is it a commercial organization? Do we have to be more careful with those sources? Probably. Then we have accuracy, which is really the information that you're reading. Is it supported by evidence? Is there evidence in an article that you can find? Are the sources clearly given? Or is it written like it's an article with sources, but really there are none? Be careful here. If there are any links, do the links work? They should work for an online article. If they're not, again, be careful about using it. The last point says is the language unbiased, which is tricky, but the idea is, remember, everybody writes for a reason. So if the language is unbiased, it will give both sides of an argument equally or pretty equally, but not all articles will do that because, well, they don't have to. They don't have to give things equally. That's not the idea. So think about that. And that also ties in with the last one of purpose. Why was something written? Is it objective? Is it a commercial idea? Is it written to entertain? Is it written to inform, educate? Yeah. And again, much of that will depend on what source you're actually reading. If it's arguing a particular viewpoint, then you need to consider alternative viewpoints as well, so you can get a good perspective on what you are writing about before you even evaluate anything. On here's a simple-ish grid, which lists the sources and what they can be best for, who the audience is, and what to watch for and consider. So take a screenshot of that. That might be very useful just to refer to in a general way. Okay, now remember, you don't need to read complete books. You don't have the time either. So look at the contents and the index, see which parts are useful. Remember, only a small part of a chapter will probably be useful as well. That's why we need to read and get a wide range of sources. If we're reading journal abstracts, if we're reading journals, read the abstract, which is the summary at the beginning. Because if the summary at the beginning is good, as in, remember, the summary at the beginning tells you what the whole article was about. So if you think, that could be quite useful, then read it in more detail, okay? Read the discussion, read the conclusion, read the introduction. Obviously, if you do read the journal abstract and you think, it's not very useful, fine, move on, go to another article. When we're reading, we need to consider these questions. Think, how will what I am reading help me? Where can I use it? Which part of the essay could I use it? Which part of the question could it answer? And if the answer is, I don't know, or I can't, then move on to another article. And reading critically, which again, it really depends on what level we are reading at, I suppose, but we want to sort of, question what we read anyway. So if you're new to this, try and begin to do it because it will be very useful for you. Do the viewpoints make sense? Do some authors disagree? Do the viewpoints seem logical? Yes, no? Why not? Explain why you think this. And this is to do with critical writing as well, okay? We're not going to go into critical writing here. I have other videos on that, so please have a look at them if you want to know more about critical writing. That's your writing plan then. Okay, now we can create a reading grid. Now this is useful if you're a bit disorganized because it helps keep track of notes, and it also allows you to make connections between sources and ideas before you actually start writing. And that's good, yeah? So rather than getting to the writing cold, you're coming to it warmer, you know, so to speak, because the idea you're making connections in the reading grid. Okay, that's what I mean is, so in this grid, you can see we've got different headings, author, title, topic, etc. And we've got an example below it. So the author title is Stevens, that's the book. There's the main topic of the book or the article, the main point, the strengths and weaknesses, limitation. This is what you think, remember. So you could say, oh, it gives different viewpoints, but the evidence is a bit outdated. So you think, well, is it useful? I mean, it still might be useful, but you might not use it a lot. How are we going to use it? Now, this is the useful column, because this is where you make connections with other sources you've read. So here, used to outline ideas on brownfield sites in contrast with Jones. So you can use it to do this when you're giving ideas on these sites. And also in a paragraph, you'll contrast it with Jones, who is another source that you've read as well. Okay. And your thoughts about what is said has some good arguments about why green spaces do not need to be built up. Okay. We also need a plan, of course. Now the plan can be different. It could be like a little bullet pointed plan where you outline briefly what you're going to put in each paragraph, so you can see for yourself. Remember, the idea of a plan, it's to help you. It's not there for the reader. The reader's not going to see the plan. The plan is to help you know that you're going to be organized, and also know that you've included everything you should include. Okay, so spend a little time going through, making a plan, so you've got enough ideas, enough evidence for each idea. And if you don't, you can also always go back and check it. Okay. So an example essay structure. Okay, now this structure might look quite simple. And if it does, that's fine, because the idea is most essays are quite simply structured. Okay, so we've got the introduction, which is usually one paragraph. Although I know some subjects have introductory sections, so you might have more than one paragraph. You've got the main body paragraphs, of course. It's where all the information, most of the information will be. And then you have a conclusion, which is usually one paragraph. So you'll see on the diagram on the left on the screen, you'll see how parts relate to each other. You know, so much of the introduction will be repeated in a way in the conclusion. And also the introduction feeds into the main body. So certain parts of the introduction feed into the main body paragraphs. Also, as it says here, when you write about a different part of your subject, start a new paragraph. So one main point, one main, for each main body paragraph. Okay, and when we've done our essays, when we're doing them, we want paragraphs. So on the left, we have 3 paragraphs for one page, although it's really 2.5 so far. On the right, we've just got one complete paragraph. We do not want to write like the ones on the right. On the left, okay, good essay structure. Not really short paragraphs either, though, okay? So I'd aim for, 2-3 paragraphs per page. So the example essay structure then, okay, so the introduction will have background information about the topic. It will tell the reader why it's important, it being the topic, why the topic is important. A thesis statement or something similar, which will be what you'll argue, and then it will have an outline structure. So these 4 main bullet points will be in an introduction. The main body paragraphs will have each of these 3 elements. It will have a topic sentence, it will then have a lot of supporting sentences, and then a concluding sentence or a linking sentence. And then you have the conclusion itself, which is the part which summarizes key points from the introduction, and also the main body as well. It returns the thesis statement. In other words, it might state the thesis statement again, just to see what's happened and how you've answered it, and it will go, give your argument or your point of view. Okay. So we're going to look at these in a little bit more detail now. So the introduction paragraph. So 4 main areas. Okay, so we want to begin with some background information about the topic, set the scene, you know, what's happening in this particular subject at the moment. Then you get a little bit more focus where you can tell the reader why the topic you're writing about is important. There's always a reason why it's being written about, not just because you've been told to write it. I get that, obviously. However, the idea is if you've been given a topic to write about, it's because it's either important for your subject or it's an issue that comes up again and again and again. Then we might give our opinion on the topic. You know, it could be what you'll argue or what your, you know, general viewpoint is or what you're going to do. That's often called a thesis statement. And then you'll describe how the essay is organized. Again, 4 key things to include in your introduction paragraphs. As it says at the bottom, though, much will depend on your question and your subject guidelines. Some introductions have a definition of key terms. So there might be some key terms in the title of the essay, which, you know, can be a bit ambiguous, you know, a bit, you know, not very clear. So if you can just tell the reader what they mean in the context of your essay, it will be useful for the reader to know. Okay, and some essays state what your essay is, what your essay found. So again, look at what your subject expects you to do. So an example paragraph for an introduction, there we go. Again, pause it, have a read. It's about green spaces and affordable housing, okay? When you're ready, click play, and we're going to go through this and see how it's formed. Okay, so there's some colors, and this is how the paragraph is being built. I always say that we build paragraphs because you're putting this bit here, that bit there, but you're putting them together for a clear reason, not randomly. So we start with background with some evidence. Okay, how much evidence depends on yourself. You know, you don't need obviously to overload it with sources. But some people might think, oh, I didn't know I needed to use sources in an introduction. Well, if you've got ideas from other people, of course you need to use them. So this begins by talking about a very general area. It talks about how population increases can put strain on services. And then it says the governments have attempted to build more houses, but there's been resistance, you know, for those who say you shouldn't build on green land, green spaces. So it moves from general, setting the scene about, you know, population increases, so puts a strain on housing, and then talks about difficulties of building houses. Then we have the importance of the issue. Now notice when we look at all these examples, now look at the language that's used, okay? So here we've got, therefore, it is necessary to explore the different arguments relating to the need for houses. So again, you're saying why it's useful to look at this topic. Your viewpoint, this essay will argue that green spaces and affordable housing are both necessary. Okay, so you're going to say, yeah, we need both. And then the reader is going to say, okay, prove it. And your main body should go into more detail about these issues. And then we have the outline. It says we'll look at alternative measures that would enable houses to be built and parks to be kept. So we'll look at alternative measures. So in other words, that's what I expect to see in the essay. I expect the arguments about why green spaces and affordable housing are both necessary. And also, I expect you to show me alternative measures. Notice it's measures, so obviously it's more than one. Okay, so be clear in your own mind what the rest of the essay is about, and make sure the reader is clear as well. Okay, so then we move into the main body. Now, how many main body paragraphs? As I said, it depends on your word count. You got 5,000 words, a lot of main body paragraphs. You got 2,000 words, that's still several main body paragraphs. Okay, so the main structure for each main body paragraph follows this broad, but again, very common structure. You'll start with a topic sentence. A topic sentence tells the reader what the paragraph is about. There are many different ways to write topic sentences. If you're not sure, Again, have a look on the internet. There's lots of examples. Then you'll have supporting sentences. Now, these are where you use your evidence and examples and give details. You're expanding on the first sentence. So the first sentence tells the reader what the paragraph's about. Then the second sentence, third, fourth, fifth, some paragraphs are long, you develop the ideas. And the more confident you are, you'll have more ideas and you'll be mixing them around and combining them. And then we have a nice concluding sentence. Now you might summarize the main idea in the paragraph, almost like a conclusion in a paragraph its own, where you've got a concluding sentence. Or you might comment on the main idea and relate it to the essay question, or you might give some critical evaluation. If you're at higher levels, you will. Okay, but either way, finish off nicely. Don't just leave it there. Okay, round it off, summarize, tell the reader what point you're making by using all this evidence. So a main body example, okay, again, this is still the same essay, so it follows on from the introduction. It's about green spaces, brownfield sites. Remember, green spaces is it's the green land, fields, and brownfield sites. Brownfield sites relate to the sites that are no longer used, as in, maybe they had factories on or previous housing, so they've been used for building purposes in the past, but now they're not. Okay, so have a pause, again, click on play when you're ready. And even if the subject is not, related to yours, which it probably won't be, will it? Let's face it. Look again how the paragraph has been put together. Go through each sentence and see if you can identify the function of each sentence. Look at the linking words to begin each sentence. See how they're used, and they help the sentences join together. Okay, so here's the paragraph again. We've got some colors, which hopefully you can see. So the focus of the paragraph: an alternative to building on green spaces relates to brownfield sites. Right, so we know that's what the paragraph is going to be about. It's going to be about brownfield sites being used. Then we have a definition, just so we're clear, so the reader's clear that we understand what brownfield sites are. Remember, in essays, you're showing the reader that you know the information. Okay, so as it says, there's a definition of brownfield sites. And then it gives an argument in favor of building on brownfield, also an argument against. So here Stevens is giving both sides of the argument because he or she is aware of, it's not as simple as a one particular opinion. And then another argument in favor. And then have a comment from you, the writer, at the end. So there's like a summary of what you're saying in this paragraph. Okay, now obviously you might use different sources for different purposes. Now how you structure the paragraph is up to you, really. It depends how much evidence you can find, depends what most of the evidence seems to suggest. Okay, so here, because the writer is favoring an argument in favor, that suggests to me that most evidence out there is saying it should be, it should happen as well. Okay, so a comment from you at the end. And that bit at the bottom relates back to the introduction. Remember, in the introduction, you're saying you're going to do certain things. So the main body is where you do these things. So make sure that they relate back to each other. Now, the conclusion summarizes the main ideas in your main body paragraphs. It doesn't just repeat word for word, it summarizes them. It combines the ideas together so the reader's clear what your main points were. It comments on which ideas you agree with and think are the strongest and why. And you need to relate your comments to the subject area and what it shows about your essay's wider focus. Okay, so you might try and finish strongly with a conclusion, give the reader a takeaway message about what might happen in the future, or where this, or from investigating the issue, where it leaves the subject. Is it still quite a subject that still needs more investigation? Is it quite clear what needs to be done? You can't really say until you've read the sources and then find out what's out there. Okay, so that's really the main structure of an essay. Remember, at different levels, you're going to be expected to do different things. Higher levels, the arguments would be more detailed, because the idea is as you go through your degree program, so, first year, second year, third year, for example, maybe it's a postgrad, the idea is you're meant to improve your writing at each level. More detail, more analysis, the higher you go, okay? Longer essays, of course, need more detail, so they will take longer to write. So again, time. Quick little bit on language. So remember, we need to use academic language and also signpost language and transitions. Remember, who's going to read it? Who's going to mark it? Not you, not me, your teacher is, okay? So your teacher has expectations of how it will be presented. Remember, you will get marks on how it's presented. Although the marks on presentation won't be the most marks, because most of the marks will be for the information you use, they are still marks that you can get easily, okay? So pay attention to the way, you're putting the ideas together. Remember, if it's not clear in terms of the language, you'll lose marks, because if the reader's confused, how can he or she give you any marks? Yeah, the reader needs to understand it. So remember, when we are giving opinions, we need to move away from I. You don't write I will discuss or I think that. You'll write this essay will discuss. So in the introduction, towards the end of the introduction, this essay will discuss, for example, or analyze or outline, whatever verb you want to use. You wouldn't use I think that. You could say it seems that, it appears that. That's some cautious language. I'm going to be doing a video on cautious language, so look out for that. We can see that. Again, remove the we. It can be seen that, okay? So we're getting more impersonal. So we're using words like this and it. And if you're good on the passive language is also very good. If you want some practice with academic language and academic style, I've got a couple of videos about this, these areas, and also some on academic vocabulary to have a look through and see if they're useful. Try and build up a range of phrases you can use. That's important. Recycling, also not recycling too much. So you keep repeating, try and get some new phrases each time. Now, signposting language, sometimes just called linking words, linking language. So these are ideas, language to join your ideas together. So on this slide, you can see on the left, we've got some different words. And on the right, we can see how these words can be used for what purpose. So some words will be for contrasting, some words for examples, some words to add more detail, some words to introduce cause and effect, and some words to introduce what will happen next. So there's a couple of things. One, you need to use them because otherwise the reader will not be able to follow your ideas. That's a fact. And also, make sure that you choose the word that matches what you want to say. Understand that all these words do not mean the same. So you can't just kind of go, oh, I'll put that there, I'll put that here, I'll put that there, if you've no idea what the words mean. Moreover does not mean the same as however. Consequently does not mean the same as on the other hand. Okay, so just be careful which each word is doing, because the reader needs to be able to follow your argument. Also, you need example language for topic sentences. So these can be called transition signals or transition phrases. So these can be good, useful phrases to put at the beginning of each of your main body paragraphs. So the reader knows that, say, your third or fourth main body paragraph is still connected to the previous one. And again, there's other things we can say, but these phrases can be one way, an easy way in to beginning your main body paragraphs. Notice we've got perhaps the most important area, a further point, an important aspect, another important area. Also, that first one, perhaps the most important area, you might start with that in your main body, or you might leave that until the end of your main body, which might, make it a stronger focus for you. So see what you think works better. Okay, folks, and that brings us to the end of our webinar about writing essays. As always, remember, I've got the podcast, which is Academic Writing in 3 Minutes, which is available on Spotify. Also, remember the Instagram page, Academic English Skills UK. Don't forget the UK. And as always, we've got more videos about different things coming up. So thanks for watching it. Leave your comments below. Hope it was useful. And if not, I can do more and one with more details. Okay.